You may wonder about a podcast that just starts off, God with Us, an interview with Jeff Gissing, and you may be wondering, now what has Jeff got to do with that phrase, God with Us? We'll come back to that in just a moment. But even before we do, let me introduce Jeff. Jeff is Acquisitions Director for Tyndale Bibles, and he's going to be talking to us about a powerful way of telling the gospel, God with Us. He's an ordained Presbyterian pastor. He enjoys teaching high school, Sunday school, and leading a small group at his local church. So welcome, Jeff, to Rainer on Leadership.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. I appreciate it.
Well, the you thing is my segue. I don't know if it's a natural segue, but I'm going to make it as natural as possible. We are delighted that California Baptist is offering college credit for high schoolers. And this is the first class is absolutely free. That does not include books and course material, but it does include the tuition. You can get a significant discount of credit for every subsequent class, and you can choose from more than 30 courses. There's so much to say about this, but the main thing is you are going to be in the classroom, the virtual classroom, with other college students. And while you, the high school student, are doing this, you will be getting college credit, and you will be in the area of the classroom where college students will be there as well. It's open to third culture kids, homeschool students, private and public school students, a lot of people. The first class free is limited, so jump on it now. A lot of other universities have similar programs, and they make the classes specifically for high school students, but this is high school students sitting with other college students. They get the real deal experience. So look at the show notes, California Baptist or calbaptist.edu/PCC, and look at this information about this college credit. Okay, Jeff, let's just start off by asking you, I think we've pretty much assumed that you're not the God with us, but you're going to tell us about what God with us is. So just start off with the explanation.
Absolutely. I can't imagine a worse title for a podcast with my name in it than God with Us. Can't imagine anything further from God. But yeah, we're talking about God with Us, which is a book that we've released here at Tyndale, and it's something you might have heard called a harmony of the Gospels. And so what God with Us does is it takes the gospel accounts of Jesus' life and ministry, and it weaves them together into a single telling. And it's really remarkable in the fact that that it was able to do that without adding or subtracting any words other than maybe a comma and maybe a conjunction along the way. But it's really a significant attempt to kind of pull together all of the gospel accounts of Jesus' life and to create I like to think of it as a weaving or like a weaving together of the narrative. So you really get to enter into the story of Jesus.
You know, this is such a simple concept and yet so powerful. As a pastor myself, it's something that I look forward to picking up. And just tell us a little bit about where did this idea come from? Because, I mean, it's one of these things that's like, why didn't I think of this?
Yeah.
How did you guys come up with this and why?
Well, the idea came from the compiler, who's this is a passion project of his. His name's Jim Barlow. He's an amazing guy, and he's actually an entrepreneur, and he's an engineer by training. So several years ago, he felt God calling him to spend a year reading through the Gospels, nothing but the Gospels, just an in-depth reading of the Gospels. And as he was doing that, he kept a journal. He was studying outside material. And as a result, and because of his engineering background, actually, he began to see how these accounts, we've got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're all telling the same story from slightly different angles, and he began to see how they came together. And 150 years ago, harmonies of the gospel were popular, but a lot of times they would have them. The Matthew would be one column, Mark would be another column, and the goal there was to kind of pick it apart and show you what went where, like a jigsaw puzzle. We kind of tweaked that and changed that approach, so not to show you the differences, but to show you in stereo, as it were, like really the whole story of Jesus. And so Jim did this work over several years, and originally when he produced it, he produced a color-coded version. So you could actually read through the book, and by color, you could kind of tell which part of what you're reading came from which gospel. And you can actually access that online at our Tyndale.com website if you want to take a look at it. It turned out to be a little overwhelming, especially if you're colorblind like me. But the actual end product that we have really it's a paperback book. It has chapter headings, or episode headings, really is what we're calling them. It's like reading a novel, but in the words of the New Living Translation.
I'm glad you guys at least produced the resource where it is still color coded. It's not how I would want to read it. I'm glad that it's a print book.
Sure.
I think that's the best way to do it. But for someone who may be utilizing this as a Bible study tool, or even preaching, I'm sure that there'll be some people that want to go check it out. Yeah. That is absolutely fascinating to me.
Yeah,
I did not know that part.
Cool.
And obviously, you use the New Living Translation, the NLT.
Right.
Should there be a why behind it, or should we just acknowledge that is our choice translation, and it's also Tyndale's?
Well, the interesting thing is Jim did this project twice. He started off using another translation, and then as he was in the middle of the project, he actually switched and came over to the New Living Translation. And in conversations with him, we found out, and he's told us that he found it actually a lot easier to carry the work out using the text of the New Living Translation than the other translation.
I can see that.
And, I think part of the reason for that is, a lot of people, when they think about the NLT, the New Living Translation, they may think that it's, strictly a meaning for meaning translation, rather than a sort of word for word translation. But really, the fact of the matter is, when the translators were doing their work, and as they continue to do their work, the goal has been wherever they can be simple and literal, they will do it. And the only time they kind of sort of shift gears and pivot into the meaning for meaning is if a literal translation is going to create a barrier to the reader being able to understand it. And so we think that we found that there's a really great alignment between our desire as owners of a translation to bring people into the presence of Christ, to help them read and understand the Bible so that it can change them from the inside out, and Jim's desire to help people meet Jesus through the Gospels without having to sort of look at it as an accounting problem, but really as a sort of a way of meeting Jesus for some people for the first time, and for others meeting Jesus again in a new way.
Jeff, a large portion of our audience are pastors. A lot of those are lead pastors. And so we got thousands and thousands of pastors listening to you right now.
Sure.
What do you want to say to them? Why would it be beneficial for the pastors to recommend it? Why should they use it with their church? Help the pastor to see what they're going to do with this God with us.
Well, I think that one of the things that I personally have found the most significant about God with us is the ability that it has to, again, using the word of Scripture, to bring you into the story of Jesus. And, I'm a Presbyterian. We kind of tend to default to the epistles. Sometimes we don't spend as much time in the Gospels as we should. But one of the things that I've found is that it's by reading this account, it really presents an intimate portrait of Christ. And it's at the same time, it's using the words of Scripture. And so while we don't claim this to be authoritative, I mean, it is not the Bible, even though it is the Bible, if you know what I mean. At the same time, I found it to be really helpful as a way to as a resource to use, especially at times where in the life of a church you might want to have a renewed focus on Christ, a going deeper. I think about Easter. I think about Advent and Christmas as those times that a lot of times the whole congregation together is kind of sharing a focus on preparing for the birth of Christ, preparing for Holy Week and the death, resurrection, and ascension of Christ. So I think it's a really powerful tool. And one of the things I love the most about it is that it's not intimidating. And so for first-time worshipers, for new members, it's a perfect gift for someone who is not that familiar with the Bible. And that's really what we wanted to do, was provide a resource that would help people that are coming to the faith again or coming to it for the first time to really be able to understand and read the Bible.
A lot of churches have membership classes. And if you're listening to this and you don't, you should. This is a great gift for new members.
Ooh, I like that, Sam.
I was just sitting here listening to Jeff talk, and I thought, you know what would be a good application for this? Because it's just such a great idea. And I thought every new member of your church should get one of these books. It is a perfect gift to people. Right. And a little different, a little unique. And I like, I know what you mean when you say it's not the Bible, but it is. This is just a great way for people to understand what the Gospels are all about, and a great place for new, whatever your tribe may be. It's a great place for all new members of any church to start. And it also sends the message, well, we're keeping the main thing. So I think a great application of this is just putting it in those new member gift bags when you do your membership class.
Sure. Absolutely. That's a perfect way to use it. And, a lot of times in new members classes, we would have a series of Bible studies in the 4 weeks of the new member class. And this is something you could use in that class and then start small groups off of it. It would be a perfect kind of resource that's affordable and really flexible in how you use it.
Absolutely.
Well, Jeff, I'd love to know, obviously you were involved in this project and you were a key part of it. Tell us a little bit about your involvement and, what kind of drew you to putting this together.
Right. So I served as the acquisitions director for this project, which really means that from Tyndale's side, I was kind of shepherding the project and the vision of the project, working with a fantastic team, including our project editor, John Bryant, who's a guy who's a New Testament scholar himself, and of course working with Jim. And really our goal was, if you can maybe imagine that doing this project at the runway level on the ground, there are a ton of decisions you've got to make. Chronologically, how you render the headings, how you fit all of the pieces of the puzzle, so to speak, together. Our goal was that all of that work, all of that sort of wiring behind the end product would be invisible to the reader, and they would just see, have a clean reading experience. And so really my job was to be in conversation on a regular basis with our project editor, with the author, and making these decisions step by step on how we actually brought the work, the manuscript that he had produced, and kind of brought that into a format that was true to the vision of what we were hoping that would accomplish. And that was really to make something that somebody who was not churched, or somebody who's kind of de-churched, or was really new to the Bible would not feel intimidated in picking up and would be able to read it without some of the maybe the baggage that might come along with picking up a traditional Bible, that is sort of large and big and intimidating and all of those things. We wanted to see this as a tool that would be able to be used. And I'm really, if I did anything, I tried to keep in mind how as a pastor, how I would want to use a resource like this, and how pastors and churches could use this, because really we care about resourcing the church for ministry. And so I was always, I'm not serving a church at the moment other than in a sort of volunteer capacity, but my pastor brain's always kind of going and thinking, how can we make something that's really going to meet a need of churches around the country? And we think this is something that can offer a lot.
We do these neighbor bags from time to time. And basically, it's a very simple concept at our church. On Sunday morning, we hand out all these bags. They'll have a small gift in there and then some information about the church. And the whole thing is take a bag, don't eat the candy, and go take it to your neighbor and use it as an opportunity to invite them to church, vacation Bible school, Christmas Eve services, whatever it is. This would be a great addition to a neighbor bag. And what you could do is, hey, read part of this, and then we'll talk about it. It is a non-threatening way to start a conversation about who Jesus is, what he's about, and to get people interested in the Bible. I think you're right. You take a big old gigantic Bible to somebody's house. I mean, they're likely to accept it and to show, to be gracious that you gave it to them. But are they going to read it? Some may not. This is a good way to kind of ensure that people read what you want them to read. So, my mind's churning, and this is a great resource. And I'm thinking, this would be a good addition to those neighbor bags that we do from time to time, and to give people an opportunity to walk across the street, walk across the yard, walk down the hall of the apartment complex, and, go have a good conversation, a gospel conversation with people you already know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really perfect use. That's really what we kind of envisioned when we were creating this with the author.
We are talking with Jeff Gissing. Jeff is the acquisition editor for acquisition director for Tyndale Bibles. And we're talking specifically about this unique resource called God With Us. Jeff, you made a fascinating, I think, off-the-cuff comment right at the beginning, and I'm intrigued by it. And the comment was, well, us Presbyterians, we tend to be in the epistles more than the Gospels. And I'm just thinking about all the sermons I've heard from Presbyterians. There are a lot in Romans and Ephesians. It just hit me. You're right.
Yeah. And, obviously, there's nothing wrong with preaching from the epistles. But I think that
not at all. And I didn't mean to imply to.
No, I know.
You Presbyterians and Reformed people who are listening out there, no implication there. This was just Jeff's comment that I was. But basically, what you're saying is this is an opportunity to really focus on the Gospels. That's the positive.
Absolutely, and I think that's personally, has been really fruitful in my own life. And again, especially during those seasons of preparation, as you're approaching Christmas, as you're approaching Easter, or even if you're, into the new year and you're kind of reading about the story of the Advent and the Incarnation. All those things are. I think this is a perfect way to really use this perfect resource to help people engage with the Bible and engage with the Lord in a new and deeper way.
Well, before we go, and Sam is going to sign us off in just a moment, talking about another NLT, the Filament Bible. He'll be talking about that to close this out. Talk to us just really briefly about what you're just seeing with the NLT translation as a whole. I know you're seeing that God is using it in mighty ways, but just a brief word about the NLT before Sam signs us off.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're seeing that the NLT is continuing to grow in popularity, and we're continuing to work to make that the most accurate, readable, accessible translation that's out there. And we're finding that we're getting feedback and comments from pastors and scholars and from different schools of theology, different sort of approaches of who may not even have the NLT as their sort of a number one Bible, but they're really finding a great deal of value in it. And I can testify myself that when I was serving as a transitional pastor before I started at Tyndale, I found a huge benefit in preaching out of the New Living Translation because of those two sort of priorities that we have: simple and literal as much as possible, and making it clear and accurate where the original languages don't easily come across into English. And so I found that church members coming up to me and saying that they were understanding the Bible in a new way. And I had to do less of the classic, well, if you look at the Greek, which everybody likes, I think, if there's less of that. So we're hearing from all over the place, all over the world. In fact, we had recently did a pastors conference in South Africa of folks that are using the Afrikaans version of the New Living Translation. It's bearing fruit in God's kingdom around the globe.
Excellent.
Well, we're certainly glad to have you on the show, Jeff, and love hearing about resources from Tyndale, especially God with Us. Again, if you don't have that one, go pick it up. We love sharing practical resources that actually work for you and for your church. So God with Us is one of them, and another one that I love. All right, so you gotta know about this Filament Bible collection. And every time I show somebody, it's what I get. Here's the response I get: no way. They're just blown away. We've got to get the word out more about the Filament Bible collection. I mean, you can go so much further with your Bible reading and study without the bulk of a traditional study Bible. So it's this unique way of reading the Bible where when you're reading, you simply pull out your phone or your tablet and you use your device's camera to recognize the page you're reading. And it pulls up all sorts of information around that particular page. So if you're Presbyterian and you're reading Romans, guess what? It's got all sorts of information. So you have your Bible and you have your phone or your tablet. And it just like you'd read a QR code or something like that. And then it pulls up this incredible wealth of data from study notes and author profiles and devotionals and articles and interactive maps, videos, worship music. There is a ton here. So it kind of combines the best of an app with the best of traditional Bible reading. You cannot go wrong with Filament Bible experience. And it really is an experience. Again, every time I show my church members, like, hey, you've got to get an NLT. What do I got to get an NLT? Well, it's a great translation, but they've got Filament. Well, what's Filament? And I show them, and they are just simply blown away. That's how I will say that we need to promote the Filament Bible. No way. No way.
Yeah.
Because that's the reaction that I get. All right. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Rainer on Leadership. Again, many thanks to Jeff Gissing, the acquisitions director for Tyndale Bibles, coming on the show, telling us a little bit about some resources that are available, practical stuff that you can use. If you're watching on YouTube, hey guys, good to see you. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a rating, a review if you like the show on your favorite podcasting app. And, well, there'll be another episode coming out next week. So we'll see you then.
Hey, folks, this is a PS to our podcast. We got some exciting stuff that we want to offer you absolutely for free. Sam, when you think about predictive factors in a church's growth, if you take out demographics, what are some things that come to mind? Just two. I mean, don't give me a list of 10. Just 2 or 3 things that come to mind on predictive growth of a church.
Well, evangelism and whether the church is doing it or not.
Bingo.
And then I will add, is it an ongoing evangelism emphasis?
Double bingo. And maybe something about leadership and their commitment to that. So all of the above.
Evangelistic churches have evangelistic pastors. Is the staff, is the lead pastor doing the work themselves?
We have a free download for you, and it's actually a sheet that you can self-score. You answer 20 questions, anywhere from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And we come back and we predict what your growth rate is going to be for the next year in worship attendance. It's not a perfect tool, but it's a good tool. There's a link to that for the attendance predictor. Look in the show notes. You'll absolutely love it. That's cool. We'll see you soon.